Oh, hi there. I'm Sam Tucker from Macro Hard. And you may have heard recently that Huawei have just announced their new HarmonyOS
MatePad Pro 13.2. This was the first consumer device that could run HarmonyOS Next, what we now call HarmonyOS 5 and above.
Here is a number that should stop every Microsoft executive cold. 1 billion. That is the active device count for an operating system that the American technology industry spent years dismissing as a regional experiment, a survival project born out of desperation, cobbled together by a sanctioned Chinese company with no access to American technology, destined to remain a domestic curiosity with no realistic path to global relevance. 1 billion active devices. More than 8 million registered developers building for it. 4 consecutive quarters beating iOS in China's smartphone market. A consumer chief going on state television and declaring publicly that the target is 1/3 of the global smartphone operating system market. Not China's market, the global market. And now, as of May 2025, the first laptops in Huawei's history shipping with 0 Windows, not because Huawei chose to walk away from Microsoft, but because Microsoft's supply license expired and US sanctions made renewal impossible. So Huawei did something that nobody in the technology industry predicted. They did not scramble for an alternative. They did not patch together an Android port or deploy a Linux distribution. They launched a completely homegrown PC operating system built from scratch by more than 10,000 engineers over 5 years, containing no Android code, no Windows code, and no American technology anywhere in the stack. What started as a forced survival response to the most aggressive technology sanctions any company has ever faced just became one of the most credible threats to Microsoft's global operating system dominance in decades. And the part that should concern Microsoft most is not what HarmonyOS is today.
Huawei has released its much-anticipated Harmony operating system. It's developed by its in-house team for use across all of its smartphones and smart hardware devices.
It is the trajectory it is on and the structural forces accelerating it in markets that Windows has always treated as permanently secured. To understand why this moment matters beyond a single product launch, you have to understand what Huawei actually built and how they built it under conditions designed to make building it impossible. In 2019, the United States added Huawei to the Entity List, cutting the company off from American technology exports. No Google services, no ARM licensing on the same terms, no Qualcomm chips, no Microsoft Windows renewal. The intent of those sanctions was to make Huawei's consumer technology business unsustainable. Without Android, without the Google Play Store, without access to the application ecosystem that billions of smartphone users depended on, Huawei's smartphone division was supposed to wither. Without Windows, their PC business was supposed to collapse. The sanctions were designed to exploit Huawei's dependency on American technology infrastructure as a strategic vulnerability. The calculation was that a company which had built its consumer products on top of American platforms could not survive the removal of those platforms. That calculation was wrong. Huawei responded to the sanctions not by finding workarounds or lobbying for relief, but by launching a 5-year engineering program to eliminate every American dependency from their technology stack, their own kernel, their own security architecture Starshield, their own semiconductor design through HiSilicon, their own application ecosystem, their own AI models through DeepSeek and Pangu AI integration. Over 10,000 engineers working for half a decade to build, from foundations up, a complete technology platform that owed nothing to any American company and could not be affected by any future American export control decision. The result is HarmonyOS Next, also called HarmonyOS 5, a genuinely independent operating system that runs on 1 billion devices and just launched its PC ambitions on hardware that contains no American code anywhere in the stack. Microsoft's license expiring was not a crisis for Huawei. It was a deadline that HarmonyOS was already built to meet. The scale of what Huawei has assembled needs to be understood in comparative context rather than absolute numbers, because the absolute numbers alone do not fully capture what they represent. HarmonyOS reached 1 billion active devices by October 2024, with continued expansion through 2025. That device base spans smartphones, tablets, smart TVs, wearables, smart home devices, and now personal computers. Global smartphone market share grew from 2% in the first quarter of 2023 to 4% by the fourth quarter of 2024. In China, the world's largest smartphone market, HarmonyOS, surpassed iOS in smartphone shipments in early 2024. In the first quarter of 2025, Huawei and Xiaomi each held 19% of China's smartphone market, while Apple sat at 15%. With all of its brand power, its ecosystem loyalty, its decades of premium consumer positioning, its trillion-dollar marketing infrastructure. Sitting behind Huawei and China, in the world's largest smartphone market, while Huawei operates under the most restrictive technology sanctions ever applied to a consumer electronics company, the developer ecosystem that is built around HarmonyOS is the metric that matters most for long-term platform viability. Platforms live or die on their developer ecosystems. When Windows Phone collapsed, it had fewer than 700,000 registered developers, a number that proved insufficient to sustain the application breadth that smartphone users required. HarmonyOS has more than 8 million registered developers, more than 10 times the developer base that Windows Phone had when Microsoft pulled the plug on it. The platform runs on more than 40 Huawei devices with over 30,000 applications available. The ecosystem is not complete by Western market standards, but it is real, it is funded, and it is growing in a market of 1.4 billion people where WeChat, DingTalk, and local cloud services cover the vast majority of what users actually need computing to do. The application gap that doomed Windows Phone does not exist in China for HarmonyOS in the same structural way it existed globally for Microsoft's mobile platform. May 19, 2025. Huawei launches the MateBook Pro and MateBook Fold Ultimate, the first laptops in the company's history shipping without any version of Windows. The hardware is premium manufactured in Chengdu, positioned against the MacBook Pro in design quality and specifications. The operating system is HarmonyOS 5, running on Huawei's own kernel with Starshield security architecture. The interface is clean and functionally familiar, a taskbar at the bottom, resizable windows, multi-window management, and cross-device integration that allows direct file transfer from a Huawei smartphone to the laptop without cables or cloud intermediaries. A built-in AI assistant called Celia handles document summarization, presentation building, and contextual search. At launch, the platform supports over 150 exclusive applications, more than 2,000 universal applications, and compatibility with over 1,000 external devices. Not a complete replacement for Windows in Western enterprise contexts. A complete replacement for Windows for the hundreds of millions of Chinese users whose daily computing centers on WeChat, DingTalk, OfficeSoft, and local productivity and cloud services. Huawei's consumer chief statement at the launch event was framed as a product pitch. Read it again and it sounds like something different. The Harmony laptop gives the world a new choice. That is a geopolitical statement delivered in product language. A new choice that exists entirely outside American technology infrastructure. A new choice that no export control decision, no sanctions regime, no license expiration can remove. A new choice that has Beijing's institutional support behind it, state enterprise adoption driving initial scale, and a company investing 179.7 billion yuan, approximately 20.8% of total revenue, in research and development annually, with approximately 6 billion yuan allocated specifically to developer incentives. That is not a company running a pilot program to see if independence is viable. That is a company executing a multi-decade platform strategy with the discipline and capital commitment that strategy requires. The AI dimension of HarmonyOS's PC launch deserves specific attention because it strikes directly at the strategic centerpiece of Microsoft's Windows 11 future. Microsoft bet enormous amounts of money and organizational focus on Copilot as the reason Windows 11 would justify upgrades, subscriptions, and the hardware requirements that alienated hundreds of millions of users with functioning machines. The entire Copilot plus PC narrative, the new hardware categories, the NPU requirements, the recall feature that turned into a privacy disaster was built on the premise that AI integration would create a compelling reason to stay inside the Windows ecosystem and pay the escalating cost of doing so. The problem with betting your platform's future on a specific AI feature set is that AI capabilities are not proprietary to any single operating system. HarmonyOS PC ships with AI assistants powered by DeepSeek and Pangu AI large language models, offering document summarization, contextual search, intelligent suggestions, and workflow integration baked into the operating system at a foundational level from day one. Microsoft spent years retrofitting Copilot into an operating system architecture that was never designed around it, embedding it into applications that existed and functioned perfectly without it, generating the user backlash that forced partial rollbacks and public statements about being more thoughtful about where AI appeared in the interface. HarmonyOS built its AI integration from the ground up in a purpose-built environment. The result is AI assistance that operates as a native system capability rather than a feature grafted onto legacy architecture. Microsoft's trump card, the AI-powered Windows experience that was supposed to justify everything, already has a Chinese-engineered equivalent shipping on Huawei's PC hardware. And that equivalent does not come with years of clunky implementation history, user backlash over forced integration, or a privacy scandal around a surveillance feature that had to be redesigned 3 times before it was deemed acceptable for public deployment. The geographic expansion strategy Huawei has mapped out for HarmonyOS is the dimension that turns this from a China-specific story into a genuine global threat to Microsoft's addressable market. China is the foundation. Southeast Asia is the first expansion target. International market entry is planned for 2026, with direct competition against Android as the stated objective. Consider the scale of the Southeast Asian market in isolation. Indonesia alone has 280 million people. Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, and Malaysia combined add more than 300 million. The total addressable population across Southeast Asia exceeds 600 million people. Most of them use Android smartphones. Many of them use Windows PCs. And most importantly, many of them are now facing the specific pressure point that Windows 11's hardware requirements created globally. Hundreds of millions of perfectly functional computers sold as recently as 2018, now ineligible for Windows 11 upgrades, machines that run everything their owners need, machines that have nothing physically wrong with them, machines that Microsoft's TPM2 requirement has officially rendered obsolete. In Western markets, users facing that ultimatum have Linux as a maturing alternative and MacBooks as a premium escape route. In emerging Asian markets, the calculus is different. Linux adoption requires technical comfort that mainstream consumers in those markets have not developed en masse. MacBooks are priced beyond the realistic reach of the majority of the addressable population. And into this specific vacuum, hundreds of millions of users with functioning hardware that Windows 11 refuses to support, unable or unwilling to purchase new Windows-compatible equipment without a comfortable existing alternative, Huawei is arriving with an operating system that runs efficiently on existing hardware, integrates with the Huawei smartphones that dominate those markets, and does not require users to hand their data to American cloud infrastructure. The market conditions HarmonyOS is expanding into were not created by Huawei. They were created by Microsoft's own product decisions. The government adoption playbook that is already executing in China deserves particular attention because it is historically proven and structurally powerful. Major Chinese ministries and state-owned enterprises have already initiated Windows to HarmonyOS desktop migration pilots. This is precisely the adoption template that Microsoft used to achieve enterprise dominance in the 1990s. Prove the platform works in government. Use state contracts as the forcing function that drives capability development and ecosystem expansion simultaneously. Then expand to private sector organizations, universities, and consumer markets that follow institutional signals when making technology adoption decisions. The Chinese government has both the authority to mandate adoption within its institutional sphere and the motivation to do so. Reducing strategic dependency on American software infrastructure is an explicit national priority, not a preference that individual ministries can opt out of. The state-backed forcing function for HarmonyOS adoption in Chinese enterprise is real, funded, and executing. Once Chinese government deployments at scale prove the platform's enterprise viability, the expansion into private sector, education, and consumer markets follows a template with well-documented historical precedent. The Middle East and Africa represent the further expansion horizon that rarely receives adequate attention in Western technology coverage. These are markets where Microsoft's licensing model has always been expensive relative to local income levels, where hardware refresh cycles are longer than in North America or Europe, where Windows 11's hardware requirements are creating particularly acute forced obsolescence problems, and where American technology companies have generated growing skepticism about data sovereignty and cloud infrastructure control. HarmonyOS offers something no previous challenger to Windows has been able to offer in these markets, simultaneously a mature ecosystem with a billion-device installed base, AI capabilities built in natively, hardware integration that works without American cloud dependencies, and backing from a company with the resources and strategic commitment to sustain a decade-long platform build-out. The conditions that make HarmonyOS attractive in Southeast Asia apply with equal force across much of the Middle East and Africa. Microsoft's executives understand privately what they cannot say publicly. HarmonyOS does not need to defeat Windows globally to inflict severe damage on Microsoft's revenue model and strategic position. The math is straightforward and uncomfortable. If HarmonyOS captures 30% of the PC market in China entirely plausible, given state institutional backing and Huawei's existing consumer dominance that represents approximately 80 million computers per year, running no Windows whatsoever. If the expansion into Southeast Asia captures meaningful share across that region, another 40 to 50 million potential Windows users annually are removed from Microsoft's addressable market permanently. That is, before accounting for the ongoing smartphone ecosystem effects, every user who lives their mobile computing life inside HarmonyOS's ecosystem is a user who is not building the Microsoft account relationships, OneDrive habits, and Microsoft 365 dependencies that funnel into Windows PC revenue. Platform ecosystems reinforce each other. 1 billion HarmonyOS smartphone users are a recruiting pipeline for HarmonyOS PC adoption that has no equivalent flowing in Microsoft's direction from Huawei's markets. Huawei's chairman stated publicly that the target is at least 1/3 of the global smartphone operating system market. 1/3. That target, if achieved, would represent the largest shift in global operating system market share since the smartphone era began. It would not be achieved through Western markets where geopolitical concerns, brand trust gaps, and application compatibility requirements create genuine barriers to HarmonyOS adoption at scale. It would be achieved through China's domestic market, the Southeast Asian expansion, the Middle Eastern partnerships, the African markets, and the developing economy contexts where Microsoft's hardware requirements, licensing costs, and cloud infrastructure dependencies are most problematic, and HarmonyOS's alternatives are most compelling. The path to 1/3 of global smartphone share does not run through Cupertino or Redmond. It runs through Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Riyadh, Lagos, and the hundreds of millions of users in those markets who are currently being poorly served by the existing duopoly. The honest competitive assessment acknowledges that HarmonyOS faces genuine obstacles outside China that should not be minimized. Brand trust in Western markets carries significant geopolitical baggage that enterprise buyers are not going to overlook quickly, regardless of the platform's technical merits. Application compatibility gaps remain real for users whose workflows depend on software that exists only in the Windows and macOS ecosystems. The security concerns that Western governments and enterprise IT departments attach to any technology with Chinese state connections are not irrational and will not dissolve because Huawei demonstrates technical competence. These are genuine challenges, not excuses invented by Microsoft's communications team. HarmonyOS is not going to be running 30% of Western enterprise PCs in 2027. That is not the trajectory anyone is actually describing. But the trajectory that is actually happening is significant enough without Western enterprise penetration to constitute a serious structural threat to Microsoft's global position. As of the second quarter of 2025, HarmonyOS holds 4.25% of global smartphone market share, making it the third largest smartphone operating system in the world. Third globally, ahead of every other challenger that has attempted to break the Android and iOS duopoly. And it is growing while Microsoft's Windows is simultaneously managing a rebellion from its own existing users, enterprises calculating that Linux is financially superior at scale, European governments citing sovereignty concerns and regulatory compliance as reasons to migrate, OEMs running pilot programs that prove Linux generates lower return rates and higher customer satisfaction on identical hardware, and hundreds of millions of consumers on end-of-life Windows 10 choosing Linux or older hardware over upgrading to a platform they distrust. Windows is losing users from the inside, while HarmonyOS expands from the outside. That two-directional pressure is the combination Microsoft has no clean strategic answer for. Bill Gates built Microsoft's empire on a foundational insight about technology power that proved correct for 3 consecutive decades. Whoever controls the operating system controls the platform, controls the ecosystem, controls where the money flows. Every hardware partner, every software developer, every enterprise IT department, every consumer who opens a computer and sees Windows waiting, all of them exist inside a value chain that Microsoft sits at the top of because it controls the default. That insight drove the OEM pipeline strategy. It drove the application developer relationships. It drove the enterprise licensing model. It drove every decision Microsoft made about what Windows should be and how aggressively it should be positioned as the unavoidable foundation of personal computing. Huawei read the same insight, and they spent 6 years executing against it with the kind of engineering discipline, capital commitment, and strategic patience that circumstances required and that Beijing's institutional backing made possible. The operating system they built is running on 1 billion devices. The developers building for it number 8 million and growing. The government adoption pipeline in China is operating and expanding. The geographic expansion into Southeast Asia and beyond is planned and funded. The AI capabilities are native rather than retrofitted, and the specific market conditions that make HarmonyOS compelling Windows hardware requirements forcing obsolescence, Microsoft licensing costs, straining budgets in emerging markets, American cloud infrastructure creating sovereignty concerns for governments and institutions, Windows update failures eroding user trust globally, were not manufactured by Huawei. They were manufactured by Microsoft's own product and business decisions over the past 4 years. The operating system war that Microsoft thought it won 30 years ago when Windows became the default on virtually every non-Apple computer sold worldwide is not over. It just acquired its most credible and most structurally serious new challenger, one that runs on 1 billion devices, one that has Beijing's full institutional support, one that built its platform independence under the most restrictive sanctions ever applied to a consumer technology company and emerged stronger for having been forced to build everything itself. One that does not need to win in the United States or Europe to permanently shrink the addressable market that Microsoft's Windows revenue depends on, and one that is expanding into exactly the markets where Microsoft's own decisions have created the most acute vulnerabilities and the most receptive conditions for an alternative platform with serious engineering behind it, serious money funding its growth. That is not a regional curiosity. That is a platform-level competitor, the kind Microsoft has not faced since the browser wars of the 1990s. And this one has a billion-device head start.